Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of TBR. And I'm George Binns. And we're lucky again to have with us our State Senator, Joan Lovely, to talk about what's the state doing these days. So I guess you just were mentioning that things are getting post-COVID finally in downtown.
They are. So, being in the State House just in the last couple of months, people are back. The public has come back. We're seeing a lot of school groups, and it's great because that building is meant to be alive and to have people in it. And so people are back. It's great.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on, and I guess one of the big things right now is the budget's coming up, and the governor has proposed lots of different taxes and adding some new ones in or recovering some old ones.
Right.
And there's a lot of kickback already that a tax on candy. And I think we talked about that the last time. That came out just before Valentine's Day.
Right.
Yeah, doesn't seem like the thing. And then the new one is resurrecting this $2 tax on all prescriptions.
Right.
And I guess my concern is, well, some of the prescriptions that we have to buy, even with insurance, it's a couple $100. So a $2 tax, you hardly notice it. But I guess the concern is, well, it's $2 this year. Next year, it's going to be $4, and start creeping up until it gets to be a significant number. And
So it has been proposed by the governor in her budget.
Yeah.
We're hearing a lot of feedback. People are feeling that they're taxed enough, and that they're certainly not looking to tax prescriptions. Probably almost everybody on the planet probably takes a prescription or two. I know I do.
Oh yeah.
And so don't go after that vulnerable population of people who rely on their medications and try to get tax revenue there. I just don't agree with it. The candy tax, I think that's again. I suppose if you're going to tax, we've talked about taxing soda as well, that would have to go, all those dollars would have to go directly into nutrition programs. So, because, eating a lot of candy and drinking a lot of soda is not good for you. Yeah. Everything in moderation, as my mother used to say. Yeah. But I don't agree with that either. Just doesn't make sense.
Well, I guess that's the basic problem, that the state is trying to do a lot of things for a lot of people. And that's basically the business of the state, is take care of the people.
Right.
And the more that they try to do, it's got to cost. Somebody's got to pay for it. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So I guess the challenge comes down to, do we really need to do all this stuff? And are we getting caught up in, well, like the big problem right now is all the immigrants that showed up, and all of a sudden they got to have a place to live because we've got this shelter guarantee law.
Right, the Emergency Assistance Program. Now that's for families only, so you'd have to be a family, a parent, and a child under 18. So not for anybody that just shows up. That would just be for families. And yes, that was put in place back in the 1980s by under Governor Dukakis and the legislature then. And there was a natural cap on it of how many families really that system could afford to take care of. But in the last year, we've seen this big influx of migrants coming up from the southern border and from the from Florida and Texas and Arizona, and they were flown up here and bused here, and in the middle of when the winter was beginning. So it has had a cost to it. The governor has put a lot of restrictions on it. And currently, right now, about 60% of people in the shelter system are Massachusetts residents, U.S. citizens, that find themselves homeless. And about 40% are migrants who have come here to the state. Yeah. But the governor has put, and the legislature has supported, some pretty, strict restrictions on getting that back to what it was supposed to be, that from what Dukakis and the legislature created.
Yeah, they got a wrinkle, I guess, that they weren't doing too good a job just checking out who's going in there, and had some bad actors show up.
Yes.
And,
Yep.
and it's
There wasn't enough, safety measures put in place, and
Yeah.
we were told that there were criminal background checks when they were, in fact, were not happening.
Yeah.
Those are happening now. We're not going to harbor criminals, whether you're a citizen or not. We're not going to harbor criminals.
the only harbor in the state pen.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's a place to keep them. But you get into a lot of these issues, I think, and one that's been bothering me is you see the write-ups in the newspaper about what's going on, and there's an awful lot of, well, this could happen and that could happen, and guess what this disaster is going to be? And I guess from somebody on the inside, what's really happening? Was the tariffs getting to us yet, or is these executive orders from the president, is that really showing up, or is this just people wringing their hands?
Well, the president campaigned on how he wanted to downsize government, and he does believe that he can do it by executive order, but a lot of these branches of government or agencies were created by Congress as well. So
Yeah.
Congress has to weigh in, and that's why there's over 150 lawsuits now across the country. The attorneys general are suing the president based on violation of the law or of the Constitution. So those will work their way through court. So a lot of these executive orders don't carry the weight that the president would like them to, because they do have to go through Congress. As far as tariffs, I've been trying to really educate myself on tariffs, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
Because if you impose a tariff on a country, say the 200% on wine imports, right? Then so then those countries will now impose a 200% tariff on something else. So, and it really comes down to the consumer that ends up paying it.
Oh yeah, it always ends up out of your pocket, because that's where all the taxes and all the tariffs show up.
Right.
And
Right.
I guess one that we've talked about in the past, the hydroelectric power that comes down from Canada.
Right.
And this was a long time coming. There's a lot of pushback about putting the cable through the woods because it would upset the environment and
Right.
all this good stuff.
Yep.
But eventually we got it, and then it turns out that we're getting about 5% of our electricity from Hydro-Quebec.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we're not. But it's not because of the tariff, it's because they're running out of water. Again, this is one of my pet peeves. What's the real story? Is it really, like you say, a tit for tat with the tariffs, or is it really a problem that it's not as dependable as we thought it was?
Well, it's interesting because a delegation went up to Canada just last week. I was not part of that delegation, but 11 legislators from the House and Senate went up to the headquarters at the James Bay Generating Facility, Hydro-Quebec, to just see what's going on and get a better kind of a broader strategy to explore more affordable energy that we can purchase from Canada, and renewable forms of so carbon free like hydro. I hadn't heard from that that trip that there's a shortage of power coming out of Quebec. So we actually need other countries to partner with trade. The other things that we get from Canada is fuel oil and precious metals, natural gas, and a lot of lumber. A lot of our lumber comes out of Canada. So, if we put tariffs on these, it's, again, the consumer that will pay for it. And we are, we're looking at offshore wind, and now we know that the president is not a fan of offshore wind. It'll probably be upwards of a decade before we see those turbines, the amount of turbines in the Gulf of Maine. That would be the next project, to be able to get that renewable energy to our, keep the lights on. It comes at a cost. So how do we balance that cost with making that happen and turn back the clock on climate change?
Well, one of the things that I think I saw again in the newspaper, and I'm not sure it's accurate, but there has been a delay or a pushback on some of these wind farms.
Yeah.
And I know they had a problem with the one off of Block Island. They lost the cable connection, and then they broke a couple of blades. And I wonder if that's the impact of it, that we're pushing back and saying, too soon, maybe not ready for it yet. Or
European countries have had wind power for quite some time.
Yeah.
So they certainly want to be here in the market to be able to assist or be part of the process. So they've really worked out a lot of the issues over there. And, they're powering a lot of especially in the Nordic countries, they're powering a lot of their homes, businesses, with wind power. So we have to, we can look to them to see what the problems are to make sure we don't repeat them. But you're right. We did have a blade that came off of, wasn't it washing up on either Nantucket or I think it was Nantucket, and people were very upset. And I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Don't blame them. Something went wrong, so now they have to assess that and see what is the fix. But I think it's a part of our future portfolio.
Yeah. Same thing happened in that pair of wind turbines that were out in Gloucester. One of them threw a blade.
One of them did, and it's down now, right? So there were three. There were three. That's in Blackburn Park.
Yeah.
My husband and I just took a ride last weekend, and when we were driving by, and I said, "Oh, that tower is down," but because you're right, one of them fell off.
Yeah, and so.
And those are big.
It's not as easy as they think.
No. And that's it. Those are enormous.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Blades are like 200-300 feet long.
They are. They are.
And they don't look like they do anything. They're just slowly going
They
around.
do.
But
So in Charlestown, under the Tobin Bridge, not like in the river part, but on the side, is the Clean Energy Center, the CEC. And they have a wind turbine blade testing facility there. And you go in, and it's like a football field or longer, long.
Oh, yeah.
And they're in there testing those blades for, to make sure that they're the ability for them to be able to do what they need to do, because they are so large. It's fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's a big business. And
It is.
GE just divided itself into 3 pieces, and one of them is in the business of making wind turbines.
Utility companies are looking at it too.
Yeah.
They want to get into the wind turbine.
Well, the neat thing about the wind turbines is they're up and running usually 35, maybe 40% of the time, which is a lot better than solar panels.
Right.
Solar panels are good for 24, 29% of the time, depending on who's
Depends where you live, right? And if you're in New England, you're going to have cloud cover much of the winter. But if you're in Florida or the southern state, you're probably going to see more sun.
Yeah, it's almost hilarious because Texas and I think it was Hawaii both put a ban on taking solar power from the roofs and shipping it into the grid because the grid can't handle it. They get too much.
Interesting.
And it got to the point where if you want to put a solar panel on your roof, you got to put in a battery pack to store the energy.
Which is a good idea.
And that brings up another question I've seen recently, that the state is spending like $500,000 to buy a bunch of industrial-sized batteries to smooth out the load.
I had not heard that actually. Was that recent? I must have missed that in the news.
Yeah.
But that makes sense, I mean, you really do want to, if you're producing more power than you can use, you want to store it.
Yeah, plus you're producing it at the wrong time. The old classic example of the peak power requirement for electricity is 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when Mama starts making a little supper.
Sure.
And everybody comes home, and the TV set goes on and all that.
You're right.
So that's the usual time that the sun is starting to set.
That's a good point.
And that's one of the big challenges with solar and wind, is that when it's available, it may not be when you need it.
When you need it.
Yeah, so that brings up the question of where are you going to put all these battery packs and how much are you going to get?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and these battery packs, batteries use, special precious metals
yeah.
that aren't
Absolutely.
readily available in our country, and that's why we need to, keep open our trading with other countries. And I know that's part of, what they're talking about with Ukraine.
Yeah.
Ending the war with Ukraine and Russia, because Ukraine has so much precious metals.
Yeah, and one of the irritating things, though, we do have some around, but nobody wants to mine them. You can't do that. So there's a big challenge with the environmentalists to get some of these things that we need.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, was one of the lessons learned from COVID. We're not as resilient as a country as we thought we were, because when COVID hit, you couldn't get a lot of things.
You couldn't get face masks.
Yeah, and one that surprised me, we can't get IVs. We don't make them here.
We don't. That's right. That's
So-
right. We don't. Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
They make those in Puerto Rico, and there was that big hurricane.
Yeah, that hurricane
Yeah.
wiped out their
Yep.
grid system. So there's a lot of problems that
Yeah.
that
We
we're facing.
need to be, producing more in our country, and I think that was a lesson learned. That
Yeah.
we weren't. No one was prepared for a pandemic, but we certainly weren't.
No. And one of the things that did come out of it, though, was the fast development of a vaccine. So that was one
That's
of the
true.
Yeah, one of the positives, one of the few
Right.
that yeah.
Right, and they had the mRNA protocol. That had been invented, if you will, decades ago.
Yeah.
And they'd used it in some delivery of vaccine, but that was the quickest way to do it. Although
Yeah.
some people were resistant to it, I understand.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Nothing's absolutely perfect.
Right.
Well, the one that gets me is penicillin was discovered, I don't know, in the 1920s. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until we got into World War II that we found out, well, the sulfa drugs really aren't working. We need something else. That Merck came up with a process to make penicillin.
Mm-hmm.
And
Life changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things I got a kick out of as a kid growing up, we didn't have penicillin when I was growing up until after the war. Mm-hmm. And about that same time, the medical profession discovered viruses. Everything wasn't a bacteria. Mm-hmm. And it used to be that you go to the doctor and he'd look you over and says, geez, I don't know what you got. It must be a virus. Let me give you a shot of penicillin.
Right, which did nothing.
Yeah, it's just funny, those funny
Right.
things. But when you get into some of these issues right now, as we were talking before the show, there is a challenge right now with gas and electricity.
Yes.
And
There is, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the legislature just had a briefing yesterday by the Department of Public Utilities, who oversees the regulations of utility companies, both gas and electric. And it was actually a learning experience for me, to know that we have three electric utilities, so in Mass, Eversource, National Grid, and Unitel. We have 41 municipal light plants. So there's one in Peabody, there's one in Marblehead, there's one in Danvers, where they either produce their own power or they secure power through large agreements.
so the city runs the
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. It usually is to a lesser rate for their electric light customers. So it's very interesting. And then the gas distribution, there are 5 gas utilities: Berkshire Gas, Eversource, Liberty Utilities, National Grid, and Unitel. And four municipalities have gas companies, which I thought was interesting. So I don't know how they produce gas or how they secure it or procure it, but it was really interesting. But then they got into the whole thing about how the DPU sets the rates. So we know that the rates are set in the fall, where all the gas and electric companies have to submit to DPU. This is what we want to charge for the winter. We know the winter rates go up, supply and demand, and so that's what they do. And they set those rates back in November. And then, of course, January was an incredibly cold month, right? So we're already paying higher rates.
Yeah.
And then January hits, and it's extremely cold. So there's the demand side, and the supply side. Demand goes up, supply goes down, it costs more.
Yeah.
And people went crazy, and I don't blame them. My bill went crazy too. And so the legislature wrote to the DPU, the governor, and all, over the course of the 4 weeks in February, they were able to come up with some relief. I think they could have been better, but they came up with some relief. But, you know, and you and I were talking earlier about budgeting, you know, so we budget, so we pay the same amount every month, just about, to cover it.
Yeah, they make up in the summer. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully the budget amount covers much more than the summer usage, and that extra sort of evens things out.
Right.
But I still get a big bill at the end of the summer that wasn't quite enough, but okay.
Right.
It's less painful that way,
A little
I guess.
less painful, right. So it's complicated. You have to pay for distribution, supply, transmission charges, and then it's not, they showed us a bill, but there's all these little subcharges underneath.
Geez, yeah.
You know, so those don't show up on your bill. You don't see those, but there was a lot of them in there, and I was like, okay. I said, you know, really the consumer deserves to see that.
Yeah, I can get them off online for my bills.
Yeah.
They'll show me all the bits and pieces, and I think it's costing me 55% more to deliver the electricity than it does to pay for the actual electricity I use.
Yeah.
And I think for the gas, it's 60 some odd percent. And get into a very interesting predicament that there was an article a couple of months ago now of, I think it was Somerville, where a large area had switched to ground source heat pumps. And they were going to save a lot of energy doing it that way. Except because of the cost of electricity in Massachusetts, the savings weren't that good after all. And this is one of the things that I think is counterproductive when you start talking about a carbon tax that's going to drive up the cost of the natural gas we use to make the electricity, and then we expect to have a savings by moving to another device that still uses the gas to make the electricity to run the device.
Right.
And
good point.
Yeah, it gets to be a little murky, and I don't think all that gets explained very well.
Right.
And people walk into these situations, and I know here in Beverly we ran into it with the police station, that they had to drill 38 holes in the ground to
Geothermal.
run their land ground source heat pumps. That's what I know them as, is geothermals. To me, geothermal is slightly different, where you capture the heat and steam and run a turbine to make, and spin it to make electricity. There are some places like Iceland, because they're living on top of a volcano.
Right.
Well, they're living on the rift where the Atlantic and the Atlantic Ocean is splitting, and they get a lot of free heat from that.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and they make electricity that way by boiling water in the hot rocks. So that's one of the good processes. But so there's a lot of good opportunities around, but carbon tax, I'm a little susceptible to. That seems like counterproductive at times.
Yeah, but you know, again, another look at a tax to be able. A lot of times, taxes change people's behavior.
Yeah.
And then the tax isn't really what it was supposed to be over time. Look at all the electric vehicles. We want to be with all electric vehicles at some point in the future, but there's no gas tax. Gas tax would go away, right? I mean, so that helps pay. The gas tax goes right into the repair of the roads.
Yeah.
So we have to really analyze it and see how it really works.
One of the things I looked into is what the gas tax goes into, and there's a heck of an organization that's takes about a third of the gas tax just to run the organization. The rest of it supposedly gets into paying the tar, and
Right.
every
Yes.
so often I have to go out 128, and there's one section when you get out beyond 93. There's roads are sort of semi-blocked off, and they're supposed to be working on something, and never see anybody working there, but they got all the barrels out. There's a challenge keeping up with the
I was
the
just
roads.
down that way yesterday, and boy, what a traffic nightmare. You know, and
Oh, yeah.
when you get to the 93, 95 interchange there,
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough. And
Oh,
that was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Certainly wasn't
And
rush
it's the
hour.
same thing at where Route 1 goes across 128. And then you get the same thing at 95 and 93. And
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's another one when you get down to the Mass Pike.
Right.
So,
Right. People are back on the roads.
yeah, COVID is over. Yeah.
Yep, it is, thankfully.
Yeah.
Thankfully. You know, and it wasn't, I didn't have a bad winter, knock on wood. My husband and I did not. Last winter we had RSV and the flu at the same time, even though I had the flu shot. We were sick. But this winter, we're good.
So, we're good to go.
Good to go.
Well, thank you very much for stopping by this
Thank
afternoon
you.
and
Thank you.
keeping us up to speed on what's going on downtown.
We'll do it again soon.
Yeah, and have fun. And
Appreciate
ladies
it.
and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And as I mention all the times, if you got a comment, my email address is before and after the credits. And if you have a longest comment you want to make, there's room for here at the table for you right here. And thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you later.